Hello! In this video series, I will teach you how to do functional programming in JavaScript. In this first one, I will begin by telling you about one of the most important concepts in functional programming, and that is higher order functions. I will talk about what higher order functions are, and I will then move on to code and show you how to use them. But before I do that, I want to tell you why you should learn functional programming. In case you don't know me, I'm Mattias Petter Johansson, MPJ for short. I have been a full-time programmer for about 10 years. I work for Absolute Vodka, BlackBerry, and I currently work as a front-end developer for Spotify. I love functional programming. Functional programming has made programming so much more fun to me. If you have been programming for a while, but haven't yet tried your hand at functional programming before, this video is going to change your life. Learning to program functionally is going to make you a so much better programmer. You will feel much more secure with the quality of your work, and it will be a lot better, and you will be more sought after. You will be able to write your programs with less bugs in less time. Your code will have less bugs because your code will be easier to reason about, and you will be able to write it in less time because you will be able to reuse more of your code. Higher order functions. I really like saying that. It's like saying quintessential. It just makes you feel smart. So let me tell you about higher order functions, because that is going to make me feel super smart. In JavaScript and in all functional programming languages, functions are values. Let me show you what I mean by that. Here we will see the basic function in its natural habitat. So you'll all recognize this, even if you don't know JavaScript, because all non-insane programming languages have functions. But not all programming languages can do this. Create an anonymous function and assign it to a variable. Just like any other value, we can pass it around like this. And, just this will be 90. Again, in functional programming languages, functions are values. Just like strings or numbers, functions can be assigned to variables or passed into other functions, higher order functions. But what are higher order functions good for? Well, composition. The fact that we can take one function and put it into another function allows us to compose a lot of small functions into bigger functions. That's all a lot of theory. Let's look at how to actually use one of these things. Probably the most basic and useful higher order function is filter. It's really simple. Filter is a function on the array that accepts another function as its argument, which it will use to return a new filtered version of the array. Here we see a list of animals. We have Fluffykins, which is a rabbit. We have Hamilton, who is a dog. And we have Ursula, who is a cat. And we want to filter out the dogs because we're writing enterprise grade software here. I am going to show you how to do this using filter, but before I do, I want to remind you how you do this with a normal for loop. Bam! So this is just a ultra normal for loop. It creates an array to hold the dogs. It iterates over the animals array, and if the species of the animal, it being iterated, is equal to dog, it will push that dog onto the animal's array. Now, let's rewrite this using the filter function. I'm gonna comment out the for loop and keep it around so that you can see it for comparison purposes. And here goes filter. So let's have a look at this. Filter accepts one argument, another function. Functions like this, functions that you send into other functions, are called callback functions because the host function will call back to them. Filter will loop through each item in the array, and for each item it's going to pass it into the callback function. And when it does, it will expect the callback function to return either true or false to tell filter whether or not this item should be in the new array. And after it's done, it will return the new filtered array, and that will be dogs. Remember how I said that you'll write software faster when you're doing functional programming? Notice here that the example that uses filter is a lot less code than the for loop. And that is not because the syntax is cosmetically shorter or anything. It's because we're actually writing less code, less logic. The reason that we need less logic is that when we write our software in small, simple functions, they compose together, which allows us to reuse functions all over the place. So in the filter example, we are just writing one line of logic, really, which is this one, the line that determines what animals goes into the array. And the rest of the program, creating a new array and stuffing animals in it, that the for loop has to implement here and here, that is actually handled inside the filter function. It's handled for us, so we don't need to write it. Therefore, the filter function, the filter example, is basically just one line of logic. The callback function and the filter function just slot into each other. They are composable. I'd really like to stress how well these simple functions compose. Let's break out the callback into a separate variable. So notice here that isDog is just a function that checks that an object is a dog. It doesn't really have anything to do with filtering at all. It's completely decoupled from it, so we can use it for other things. For instance, if we wanted animals that aren't dogs, we could pass it to reject, which is another higher order function on the array object that does the inverse of filter. So it would be animals.reject is dog, and this will give us an array of animals that aren't dogs. So compare this to the for loop, and you'll see that we've very cleanly broken the problem up into two completely separate problems. The problem of determining if an animal is a dog or not, and the problem of creating an array and stuffing the objects into them. And this way, we're allowed to think and reason and debug these problems separately. And that is a lot easier than when the two solutions are jumbled together, like in the for loop. Today, I've talked about how functional programming means that you can write software with less bugs in less time. In JavaScript, functions are values, and you can exploit this by dividing your code into small, simple functions and composing them together using higher order functions. As an example, I showed you the higher order function filter and how it compares to normal for loop. We're just scratching the surface here. Learning functional programming is going to introduce you to a whole new world that you didn't know existed. There are many useful higher order functions besides filter. Next time I will talk about two of them, map and reduce. Do not miss it. Hit subscribe and follow me on Twitter @mpjme. Stay curious, see you next time.